So, what if the biggest conflict of the entire 20th century, capitalism versus communism, what if the whole thing was built on a lie? What if the giants of Wall Street and the masterminds behind the Bolshevik Revolution weren't actually enemies, but secret partners? Well, today we're going to dig into a hidden chapter of history that suggests this seemingly impossible alliance was very, very real. Our guide on this deep dive is a really provocative 1974 book by Anthony C. Sutton called Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. Now, Sutton, he was a research fellow who spent years, and I mean years, digging through official archives. And what he supposedly found in declassified government files, well, it challenges the very foundation of everything we've been taught about this crucial moment in history. Okay, just let this quote sink in for a minute. This isn't some college kid with a poster on his wall. This is William Lawrence Saunders. He was the deputy chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and he's writing this to President Woodrow Wilson. He's expressing sympathy for the Soviet government. A top dog in American capitalism is praising a communist revolution. How is that even possible? And that quote, it perfectly sets up this central mystery we're going to unpack today, this massive, fundamental contradiction at the very heart of the story. It turns out this idea wasn't exactly brand new. Get a load of this. Back in 1911, that's a full 6 years before the revolution, a cartoonist named Robert Minor drew this for a newspaper. You've got Karl Marx himself getting a hero's welcome on a Wall Street decked out in red flags, cheered on by guys like J.P. Morgan and John D. Rockefeller. Back then, everyone probably thought it was just a joke, satire. But was it? So here it is, the big clash. The textbook view, the one we all learn in school, is that capitalists and communists are sworn enemies, like mortal enemies. But Sutton's thesis, based on the documents he found, says something completely different. He argues there was this secret alliance, a hidden partnership, where both sides realized they could actually help each other out for mutual financial and political gain. So how do you even begin to prove a claim that huge? Well, Sutton's answer is pretty simple. Follow the money. And that trail starts with one of the revolution's most famous figures, Leon Trotsky. Okay, so in 1917, Trotsky is living in New York City, and he's making a living writing for a local Russian socialist paper. His declared income? A pretty modest $12 a week. And yet, just a few months later, he's on his way to Russia to help kickstart the revolution. He gets detained by Canadian authorities, and they find he's carrying $10,000 in cash. Now, that's the equivalent of over $250,000 today. So this just begs two massive questions. First, how does a guy making $12 a week suddenly get his hands on $250,000? And second, who were the powerful friends helping him get all the way back to Russia to start this thing? Now, this is where it gets really strange. The paper trail is just wild. Trotsky leaves New York with a U.S. passport, right? And it was personally arranged by President Woodrow Wilson. So when British intelligence grabs him in Canada, thinking he's a German agent, they don't just lock him up. Nope. The highest levels of government in both Washington and London step in and pressure the Canadians to let him go. The supposed enemies of communism were literally making sure a top communist leader made it to Russia right on time for the revolution. And that high-level assistance, that's the real key here. Why would the leaders of the Allied powers do that? To get the motive, we have to look at what they stood to gain or lose. And that means looking at Wall Street's huge financial bet on Russia before any of this went down. You see, the really big players, the Morgan and Rockefeller empires, they were no strangers to Russia. Their banks, like National City and Guarantee Trust, had been raising massive loans for the Tsar's government for years, and they often used official U.S. diplomatic channels to get it done. A key middleman in a lot of these deals was a Swedish banker named Olof Ashberg. Now, remember that name. It's going to be important. Okay, so we've got revolutionaries getting mystery money and VIP treatment, and we've got financiers with massive investments on the line in Russia. This is where those two stories crash into each other, and you start to see that some of the very same people were playing both sides. And this just perfectly illustrates the whole connection. Remember Olof Ashberg? On one hand, he was working with Morgan's Guarantee Trust to get loans for the Tsar, but on the other hand, through his own bank in Stockholm, he was the main pipeline for German government money going to Lenin and Trotsky to finance the revolution against the Tsar. The man was literally financing both sides of the war. And Ashberg's partners over at Guarantee Trust had a similar, and honestly, a jaw-dropping pattern. Just look at this table.
the same Morgan-controlled bank was financing war loans for the Allies, Britain and France, while also funneling money for German espionage against the United States. They were funding everybody. And, as we're about to see, they were making sure they'd be the go-to bankers for whatever new government came out of the chaos in Russia.
And then you've got this, the 1917 American Red Cross mission to Russia. Sounds nice and humanitarian, right? Well, except it was almost entirely made up of Wall Street lawyers and bankers, not doctors. It was privately funded by William Boyce Thompson, who was a director of the New York Fed, and one of its own members later admitted that the whole Red Cross angle was, and I quote, nothing but a mask for their real political and financial goals in revolutionary Russia. So it all leads to the ultimate question, right? Why? Why on earth would the kings of capitalism back a communist revolution? Sutton's conclusion is both incredibly simple and, frankly, chilling. They weren't trying to build a competitor. They were trying to build the perfect captive market. This quote from a book called Confessions of a Monopolist really gets to the core of the motive here. For a true monopolist, the best business isn't a diamond mine or a silver lode. It's politics. It's the power to literally write the rules for the entire economy in your favor. So here is Sutton's final shocking theory. For these monopoly capitalists, a communist dictatorship wasn't a threat. It was the ultimate business opportunity. Just think about it for a second. A single government that controls every single factory, every railroad, every bank. That's a market with zero competition. And if you can become the exclusive financial partner to that all-powerful state, you basically have a captive customer of 150 million people. You own the entire market. And if you're looking for the receipt, well, Sutton presents this as his final piece of evidence. This is the shareholder list for Ruskell Bank, the very first Soviet international bank, set up in 1922. You've got the Soviet government, of course. You've got our old friend, the Bolshevik banker Olaf Oshberg. And right there with them as a founding partner is Max May, a vice president of the J.P. Morgan-controlled Guarantee Trust Company. The partnership was now right out in the open for everyone to see. So, after all of that, it brings us back to one final, deeply unsettling question. If Sutton's evidence holds up, and Wall Street financiers helped put the Bolsheviks in power, and then immediately went into business with them, who really won the Russian Revolution?